Hi guys! Today we're going to read Chapter 9 of Sisters Grimm, The Unusual Suspects. We left off when the big mouse or rat had drank the Alice in Wonderland little eat me thing and grew into enormous size and is now loose in the school. All right, Chapter 9. Okay, everyone, there's no need to panic. We're professionals and we know how to handle things like this, Daphne assured the crowd of stunned students as she flashed her shiny badge. All at once, every kid at Ferryport Landing Elementary freaked out. They screamed and ran towards every available exit. Some raced into the classrooms, barricaded the doors with desks, and climbed out the windows. Puck peered into his pocket and smiled at Sabrina. Hang on, I've got this, he said, flashing her a grin. He spun around on his heels and transformed into an orange and white alley cat. Sabrina found herself clinging to the cat's ear as she charged towards the giant mouse. Once he was close enough, Puck, the cat, hissed aggressively. Suddenly, what Sabrina could only describe as a smile crept across the mouse's face. It leaned its massive head down to the cat, opened its mouth, and roared angrily. Puck's short tabby hair was brown-black, as if he were standing in a heavy wind. And Sabrina nearly flew off his ear. The cat backed away and transformed into a boy again. It was worth a try, Daphne shouted. Don't worry, Puck said, with Sabrina back inside his shirt pocket. I've got a million more ideas where that one came from. The boy spun around to face the mouse, and his wings popped out of his back. Flapping strongly, he soared over the mouse and landed on its back. Hee-haw, he cried, jabbing his heels into the mouse's side. The giant rodent squealed in pain, lifted itself on its two legs, and kicked wildly, causing Puck to bounce around like a rodeo cowboy. Sabrina was tossed around mercilessly inside his pocket. In an effort to lose its rider, the mouse slammed into the walls, broke down doors, and put some serious dents in a row of lockers. It shattered a trophy case, sending glass, track medals, and baseball trophies skittering down the hallway. It crashed into a banner announcing the library's bake sale and ripped it off the wall. Of course, Puck laughed with every violent buck of the mouse's hind legs. Puck, cut it out, Sabrina shouted, clutching to the top of the pocket. But she knew the boy couldn't hear over the commotion he was making. Daphne rushed across the hallway, avoiding the mouse's flapping tail. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her half-full Drink Me juice box and aimed it at the mouse's mouth. Daphne, you're a genius, Sabrina cried. Daphne wound up like a big league pitcher, waited for the mouse to open its gaping mouth and tossed the juice box as hard as she could. Unfortunately, instead of slipping down the mouse's throat, the box bounced off one of the gnarly yellow teeth and fell to the ground. The mouse flattened the box with a stomp, spraying juice all over the hallway. We're just making it mad, Wendell shouted. The boy was right. The mouse bellowed angrily, then headed toward the exit door. Unfortunately, Daphne was right in its path. Run! Sabrina yelled, but there was no way the little girl could move that quickly. Luckily, Wendell was there, and he pushed Daphne to safety just as the enormous rodent lumbered past them like an out-of-control train. It crashed through the exit doors, breaking them off their hinges, and charged outside. Puck laughed the whole way until a low-hanging tree with a thick limb knocked him off his ride. He fell hard on his back, sending what was left of his Drink Me juice box flying. The fall launched Sabrina out of his pocket and onto the lawn several yards away. By the time she got her bearings, the mouse was already on top of Puck, doing what it could to sink its sharp teeth into him. Oh my. Juice, Puck demanded as Daphne and Wendell raced to his side. Puck snatched Wendell's Drink Me juice box with a free hand and squeezed the contents into the mouse's mouth until the box was crumbled and empty. Almost immediately, a ripple ran across the mouse's skin. The rodent shrank rapidly until it was once again a little brown mouse sitting on the boy's chest. Puck looked down at it and laughed. Then he ran his finger over the mouse's coat. Good try, he told the rodent. You almost had me. Daphne helped Puck to his feet. Where's Sabrina? She asked. Don't worry, Marshmallow. She's right here in my pocket, Puck said as he looked inside. Uh-oh. What's uh-oh? Daphne cried. She's not there, Puck said. The little girl's eyes got as big as saucers. Don't anyone move, Wendell said. She probably fell out here on the lawn and we could step on her. Sabrina! Daphne shouted. I'm here! Sabrina yelled, waving her hands and jumping up and down, but none of the children could see or hear her amid the grass that towered over her head. What if we've already stepped on her? Her sister cried as tears streamed down her face. Let's check, Wendell said. He slowly lifted each of his shoes. She's not on mine. Puck slowly looked under his sneakers. All clear. Daphne checked one foot and then the next. A big smile of relief came across her face. I think we better get the old lady, Puck said as his wings sprouted. Best that I fly us out of here so we don't squish her. In a few moments, he snatched the other children off the ground, and they were all flying away. Sabrina watched them disappear into the horizon. Don't you dare leave me, she screamed, knowing that they could not hear her. She looked around at her strange environment. The school was only steps away for a normal-sized person, but for her it was much more trying. Staying put was probably the smart idea, but the air was freezing, even with her coat on, so she shoved her hands into her pockets and marched towards the entrance to school. The walk took forever, but finding somewhere safe and warm to rest was now Sabrina's main priority. She remembered that the heat in Mr. Sheepshank's office was always on full blast, and she was less likely to get trampled there than if she headed for a classroom. When she finally got to the front entrance and climbed the steep wheelchair ramp, she ran down the hall and made her way to the main office door. She hoped it would be a safe place to hide until Puck could return with her grandmother. But as soon as she crawled underneath the door, she knew she had even bigger problems. There's another roach, the secretary with big glasses cried. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an aerosol spray can, shook it vigorously, and got up from her desk. One glance at the can told Sabrina all she needed to know about what was going to happen next. It didn't take a rocket scientist to understand what roach be dead meant. She ran frantically along the rug, racing under the secretary's desk just as the gigantic woman rounded the other side. When Sabrina came into the light, the other secretary was there, chomping on a sandwich. She mumbled loudly and pointed at tiny Sabrina, causing the first secretary to come back around. The girl dashed under the desk again, but this time the secretary got down on her knees and pointed the spray can at her and pushed the nozzle. This was unbelievable. A giant mouse had just rampaged through the school, and these goofy secretaries were worried about roaches? Sabrina braced for a coating of poison and most likely a horrible death. But luckily, the nozzle was pointed upward and the spray landed all over the desk. This one's fast, the first secretary scowled. Don't send it running over here, the second secretary cried. Those things give me the heebie-jeebies. Sabrina darted behind the file cabinet. Where'd it go? The first secretary groaned. Oh, I've got you now. Sabrina's hiding place began to rock back and forth. I'm not a cockroach, she shouted, but she knew the woman couldn't hear her. A stream of the poison came showering down from above. Sabrina darted out of the way, but the secretary seemed to anticipate her escape route and was waiting for her on the other side. The girl looked up to find the nozzle of the can pointing right at her. But the secretary never got a chance to finish her deadly work. The office door opened and Mr. Sheepshank entered. Hello, ladies. The commotion is all over. What was it? The secretary with the roach spray asked. Oh, just a big dog some kid let in, he replied. Scared everybody half to death. Most of the kids have already left for home. Principal Hamlin just told me to let you two go as well. Early dismissal for the grown-ups? I love it, the secretary with the roach spray cheered. She quickly forgot about Sabrina and got to her feet. Sabrina cowered as the woman packed their things and left. When they were gone, Sheepshank closed the door and shuffled into his office. When Sabrina's heart stopped beating like it was trying to get out of her chest, she found a warm spot on the rug and sat down. Before she knew it, she had fallen asleep. Sabrina woke up inside Elvis's nose. "Did you find something, boy?" Granny asked. "I believe he has," Mr. Canis said. With her head covered in dog boogers and mucus, Sabrina kicked for freedom, but this only caused the dog to snort deeply, and she rocketed into his nasal cavity, slid down his throat, and was quickly coughed out onto the office floor. Dazed, Sabrina got to her feet and found Granny Relda peering down at her through a magnifying glass. "Hello, young lady," she said as she reached into her handbag and removed a drink-me box. A moment later, she was as tiny as Sabrina. She held 2 eat-me cakes in her hand and a world of anger in her eyes. Her round face and button nose were so red with frustration. Sabrina wondered if smoke might blow out of her ears. "Granny, you won't believe what I found out," Sabrina said, hoping her news would change the old woman's mood. "I agree, Sabrina," Granny Relda snapped. "I doubt I'll believe anything you say for a very long time." "Daphne told you about the keys." "She didn't have to," Granny Relda said as she handed Sabrina a cake. She unwrapped her own and took a big bite. Sabrina did the same, and together the two of them sprouted up to their normal heights. Unfortunately, Elvis's boogers grew at the same rate. The Great Dane looked disgusted at the goo that covered Sabrina from head to toe. Daphne, who was standing nearby, ran to hug her sister, but halted when she saw the disgusting mess that covered Sabrina. "I'm sorry, I love you, but you are way too gross," the little girl said. "We got into the boiler room," Sabrina said, still hoping to impress her grandmother. "She knows," Puck said sheepishly. He and Wendell leaned against the wall looking guilty. Why wasn't everyone excited? They hadn't found an important clue. "I also know you did it by breaking almost every one of my rules," Granny lectured. "I suppose you are proud of yourself." "You told us that this kind of thing was our responsibility," Sabrina argued. "The whole 'we're Grims and this is what we do' baloney. Now we're actually trying and you want us to stop?" "I think you know that sneaking around behind my back, copying my keys, testing out magic and potions in the middle of the night, and dragging your sister into danger is hardly what I meant," said Granny. "Add to that your lousy attitude about ever-afters, and I just don't see you as much of a help right now." Sabrina's eyes welled with tears, but she refused to cry. She bit her lip hard and squeezed her fist tight. The last thing she would do was show the old woman that her words had stung. Granny Relda reached out her hand. "Hand them over," she said. Sabrina recoiled as if the old woman were handing her a snake. "I need them," she cried. "You are not responsible enough for your own set," the old woman said. "If you were, you would have asked for them rather than steal mine and copy them." "Someone has to look for my parents," Sabrina shouted. "Give them to me, Sabrina," the old woman insisted. Sabrina reached into her pocket and placed the keys in her grandmother's hand. "You don't care if we ever find them, do you?" she asked. "Sabrina," Daphne cried. The old woman ignored her question. Instead, she dropped the keys into her handbag and shut it tight. "Come along, Mr. Canis. We should get the children home. I believe they are all in need of a hot meal," Granny said. Dinner time was quiet. No one talked, no one made eye contact, and no one smiled. Even Puck, who could usually be counted on to fart during dinner, was oddly silent. Afterward, Granny washed the dishes while Puck, Sabrina, and Daphne stared into their laps. Elvis eyed Sabrina from time to time, but kept his distance, most likely because of her time inside his nose. A knock at the door broke the silence. Granny Relda rushed to it, opened it, and found Snow White standing outside in the cold. The old woman quickly invited her into the house. "Thank you so much for coming, Snow," Granny said as she took off her apron and folded it. "I'm happy to help. I'll take any chance to spend some time with my favorite student," the teacher said. "That's me!" Daphne cried as she rushed to the door. "What's going on?" Sabrina asked. "Mr. Canis and I are going to investigate what is underneath the school," Granny Relda replied. "While we're gone, Miss White will be looking after you." "You got us a babysitter?" Sabrina cried indignantly. "I'm too old for a babysitter." "You're too old," Puck said to her. I'm more than 4,000 years old. This is an outrage. I might have thought the same thing this morning, Granny replied as she put on her coat. But just then a car horn blast came from outside. That's the sheriff, Mr. Canis announced, and as he descended the steps, he opened the closet and took out his and Granny Relda's coats. We should go, Sabrina fumed. We've seen the tunnels. We know how to get down into them. Oh, we've got a guide, Granny replied. There was a knock at the door, and when Mr. Canis opened it, Wendell Hamlin stepped inside. He was wearing a long trench coat and a fedora pulled down over his face, like he had stepped out of a detective novel. You're taking him? Sabrina cried. Granny ignored her. The sheriff says we better get going, the boy said, wiping his runny nose on his handkerchief. He looked nervous and sad about the night's activities. Wendell, you don't have to come with us, Granny said. Your father's caught up in this. I wouldn't blame you for wanting to stay home. No, I have to go. He didn't come home from work tonight, so I didn't get the chance to convince him to stop whatever it is he's doing down there, Wendell said. He's my dad. I have to try to change his mind. Granny Relda, Mr. Canis, and Wendell said their goodbyes and were soon gone, leaving Sabrina standing by the door with a stunned expression on her face. Well, now, Snow White said, uncomfortably reaching into her handbag and pulling out a board game. Who wants to play Candy Cane? Candyland, right? Candyland, sorry. Snow White did her best to keep the kids busy. She set up the board game, but Puck had no patience for it. When he landed on Molasses Swamp and lost a turn, he flew into a rage, flipping the board and all the pieces out the front door and into the yard. Later, after he had calmed down, Miss White suggested they play charades. Once again, Puck was the spoiler, acting out the names of tree gnomes and pixies who had lived hundreds of years ago, and insisting they were famous as any astronaut or president. Eventually, Snow White gave up and let the children do what they really wanted to do: research. The girls searched the library for titles that might be of help. With half their family trapezing around in dark tunnels, Sabrina and Daphne felt the least they could do was make sure that nothing was overlooked. Eventually, Sabrina came across her great aunt Matilda's pamphlet, the one entitled Rumpelstiltskin's Secret Nature. She could see it was going to be a dry read, but it might have clues that could help. Besides, her curiosity about the child-buying weirdo was impossible to resist. She fell into a chair and stared on one page. Rumpelstiltskin's story was a famous fairy tale. Everyone knew it. But after nearly a month in Fairyport Landing, Sabrina had learned not to assume anything when it came to ever afters. It seemed as if all the bedtime stories she had heard and the movies she had seen about the various residents of her new hometown were always wrong, sometimes missing a lot of important details. Best to learn from her ancestors what the true story was. Matilda Grimm's research was meticulous. Sabrina was shocked to see how much information her great aunt had packed into a little pamphlet. It looked as if months of work had gone into analyzing every single nuisance of Rumpelstiltskin's personality, powers, and actions. Matilda had theories on how he spun straw into gold, where he came from, and why he tricked people out of their children. The book also retold at least 24 versions of the original tale. The story Sabrina knew involved a woman who begged Rumpelstiltskin for his help. In exchange, she promised to give him her firstborn child. When the baby finally arrived, the woman demanded a chance to keep it, so Rumpelstiltskin wagered that she would never be able to guess his real name. Of course, by the end of the story, she had figured it out, making the little man so angry he actually ripped himself in two. But Matilda said there was an alternate version of the ending that not many people knew. In the other ending, Rumpelstiltskin didn't rip himself in half. He actually blew up like a bomb, killing everyone within a mile. One chapter entitled The Power of Rumpelstiltskin contained theories on the source of the little man's powers. Matilda believed he absorbed energy, which made him a walking battery, and he converted that energy into his explosive power. Unfortunately, the more of Matilda's theories Sabrina read, the more questions arose. It doesn't make sense, Sabrina cried. What do Rumpelstiltskin, the Pied Piper, and the children of Ever Afters, a bunch of tunnels under the school have in common? The barrier, Puck replied. What? Sabrina asked. The barrier runs very close to the school, Puck said. You do remember making me crash into it, don't you? You're telling me this just now? Sabrina cried. Seemed obvious to me, the trickster king replied. They're digging to the barrier, Daphne said. But what would be the point? Snow asked. The point is that magic might not be as powerful underground, Sabrina said. All right, kids, calm down, Snow White said. Even if the barrier is weaker, they'd still need a huge magic explosion to crack it open. They've got one, Sabrina said, holding her great aunt's pamphlet. Rumpelstiltskin is a walking bomb. When he loses his temper, he can blow up a whole town. He and Hamlin are working together. They're going to blow a hole in the barrier. But that's insane. The river is on the other side of the barrier, at least in that part of town. Even if you could crack it open, the water would drown you, Snow White pointed out. Besides, from what I hear, bedrock, which is nearly impossible to dig through, rises up under the river. You need an army of miners to get through it. And this town isn't exactly full of people willing to do that kind of backbreaking work. They don't need willing miners if they have unwilling ones, Sabrina cried. We know the principal can control rats. Maybe he's using them to chew through the rocks. That's stupid, Puck said. You're stupid, she shouted back. Maybe he's not using rats, Daphne said uncomfortably. What else could he use? Asked Snow White. Daphne raced to the bookshelf, searched through the titles, and came back to the table with a thick book written by their distant relatives, Jacob and Wilhelm. She flapped through the pages furiously until she stopped on a story called The Pied Piper of Hamelin. I think we better read this, she insisted. Snow pulled the book into her lap and read the story from beginning to end. What they learned surprised everyone. The famous story of the piper who hypnotized an army of rodents and then drove them into the sea had a lot of twists and turns. Hamlin drowned the rats, but he didn't do it to be a hero. He did it for a paycheck. In his day, he used to travel from town to town, using his pipes to clean up messes. He drove the spiders out of Paris, the monkeys out of Bombay, and the snakes out of Prague. But he did it for money. When he showed up in the little Austrian town of Hamelin, the townspeople were eager for his help with their vermin infestation. What's vermin mean? Daphne asked. Rats and mice, Sabrina explained. Rats were everywhere, Miss White continued. They spread a lot of disease and people were getting sick. Everything the town tried failed. So the piper agreed to handle their problem. But that wasn't the end of the town's difficulties. When the piper came back, he wanted payment, but the town refused. They swindled him, and he was furious. What happened? Sabrina asked, already sensing the story's unhappy ending. He gave them 24 hours to come up with the money, but they just laughed at him, so he blew into his bagpipes, and the town's children congregated around him. The piper marched out of town with the children following behind him, just like the rats. Their families tried to stop them, but reports said that the kids were in a trance and kept following the music. They were never seen again. So, of course, it makes a lot of sense to hire him to be principal of an elementary school, Sabrina said angrily. Rats or brats, Puck said. What's the difference? Suddenly, the truth dawned on Sabrina. He's hypnotizing the students who's digging in the tunnels, she cried. What are you talking about? Daphne said. You've seen the kids at school. They're exhausted. It's because they've been working all night. The piper has been using his magic to make them work, and now they've reached the barrier. It's Rumpelstiltskin's turn to blow the place sky high. We have to warn Granny. The sheriff and Mr. Canis are with her, the teacher replied. She's very smart. She'll figure this all out before anyone gets hurt. What if they don't? Puck asked. Sabrina was surprised. The boy usually acted as if he didn't care about anyone but himself. If Rumpelstiltskin blows a hole in the barrier, Puck continued, the walls will collapse on everyone inside the tunnels, and the rivers will sweep them away. Now Sabrina was stunned. Since when did you become a hero? Hero, I just want to see it happen, Puck said. It'll be hilarious. Snow White looked from child to child and reached for her car keys. Get your coats on, she said. We're going to the tunnels? Daphne asked. Yes, but if I think it's too dangerous, we'll turn right around. Soon they rushed out the front door, only to have Snow White crash into Mayor Charming, who was coming up the path at the very moment. Snow, Charming said, surprised. Where are you running off to in such a rush? Billy, the teacher whispered, what are you doing here? They stood holding hands in the cold night air. Sabrina rolled her eyes. We're not going through this whole lovey-dovey song and dance again, are we? She cried. We've got to get going. What's going on? Charming asked. You have an update on the killings? Rumpelstiltskin and the Pied Piper have been tunneling under the school for months. They are looking for the weak spot in Baba Yaga's barrier so they can try to crack a hole in it and escape. And Granny, the sheriff, and Mr. Canis and Wendell are there now, trying to stop them. But they don't know that Rumpelstiltskin is like a live, living battery with the power to explode. And if he does, he'll collapse the tunnel and everyone inside will die, Daphne said, breathing heavily. Charming stood still with his eyes wide. What's that again? We're going to save the day, Mrs. White said. Well, take my car, the mayor declared, leading a group to his stretch limousine. Mr. Seven got out of the driver's seat, but Charming held up his head. Seven, he commanded, we need to get to the school as fast as we can. The little man crawled back into his seat, closed the door, and started the engine. Once everyone was inside, he pulled into the road and sped off like a NASCAR driver, leaving the tire rubber on the pavement behind them. You've done good work, Grims, the mayor said as he reached into his pocket and took out a small box of matches, handing them to Sabrina. We made a deal. Here's my end of the bargain. Let it never be said that I'm not a man of my word. Thanks, Sabrina said. I'll save these for next time. I need to build a campfire. Child, those aren't ordinary matches, Charming groaned. They once belonged to the little match girl. I just handed you something most people in this town would kill for. Snow White gasps. I heard a rumor that they had been destroyed. I was the one who spread it, Charming said. If anyone knew they still existed, there would be chaos in the streets. Sabrina peeked inside the matchbox. 2 small wooden matches lay inside. What do they do? I thought you two were supposed to be experts on all fables and fairy tales. The Little Match Girl is one of Hans Christian Andersen's most famous accounts. You've been in our house. There are 1,000,000 books in the bathroom alone. We don't know everything yet, Sabrina said. The Little Match Girl sold matches in the street for money, Snow White explained. One day she came across a box of them and set to make out a little money to help feed her family. But it was horribly cold outside and she was forced to light one to keep herself warm. The flame became a magical portal, leading to a room filled with food and roaring fireplace. The girl realized she had just wished she was in a place, and by striking the match, the flames took her there. Sabrina, all you have to do is wish. Like Dorothy's slippers? Daphne asked. She and her sister had used them to pop up all over town, but they'd lost one of them while running from a giant. They're more powerful than the slippers, Charming said. They could take an ever after to the other side of the barrier, or they could take you to your parents. Why would you do this for us? Sabrina asked. We made a deal, Charming said. Sabrina stared down into the box, and a tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't deserve such an amazing gift, and she knew it. For weeks, she had looked at every after as a suspect in her parents' kidnapping. She had turned everyone against her and practically broken her grandmother's heart. And yet, here was the most obnoxious, untrustworthy ever after of the bunch, handing her the keys to finding her parents. You could have used these to escape, said Sabrina. There was something that kept me here, Charming said, shooting a glance at Miss White. She caught his eye and smiled, then leaned over and kissed him. Billy Charming, make me a promise, she said, taking him by the hand. What kind of promise? Charming asked, somewhat breathless. When all of this is said and done, Snow White said, take me to the movies. Charming grinned like a little boy. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Mr. Seven turned around and smiled. It's about time. Eyes on the road, fool, Charming shouted at him, but his tone had lost his unusual bite. This is so romantic, Daphne blubbered. I think I'm going to cry. I think I'm going to lose my lunch, Puck groaned. Suddenly the car came to a screeching halt. Seven, why have we stopped? Charming demanded. The road is blocked, sir, the little man said, pointing out the window to where dozens of children were walking in the middle of the street. All of them were wearing pajamas. There were too many of them to get around. Mr. Seven honked the horn, but it had no effect on the children. The piper is controlling them, Sabrina said as they passed some of the kids. Every one of them had glassy look in their eye. We'll walk from here, Charming said. They got out of the car, leaving Mr. Seven behind to guard it. The moment Puck was on his feet, his wings sprang from his back and he fluttered to the air. What I wouldn't do for a carton of eggs, he said as he gazed down at the zombie kids. I'm going to go get some. Before he could fly away, Snow White grabbed his leg and yanked him back down to the ground. We should stay together, she said. The boy looked extremely disappointed, but his wings disappeared nonetheless. The group wove in and out of the crowd until they were standing on the front lawn of the elementary school. As they approached the main entrance, Sabrina noticed that the front doors the giant mouse had plowed through were still lying on the ground, and a steady stream of vacant children shuffled through them and into the school. They were ushered by a hulking girl with pink ribbon in her hair. Sabrina recognized her immediately. Natalie, you need to get as far away from here as you can, she warned. This place is going to get dangerous. Oh, it's going to get dangerous, all right, the big girl replied as her skin began to bubble and inflate. Hair shot from every pore, and two long fangs sprang upward from her bottom jaw. Her eyes turned milky yellow, and a long hound tongue crept out of her mouth and licked her lips. Claws sprouted from her fingertips. Daddy warned me you might show up. She lashed out at the group, knocking Puck, Charming, Daphne, and Sabrina to the ground with one great swipe. Snow White just managed to step aside, avoiding Natalie's attack. Egad, I didn't think you could get any uglier, Puck said as he climbed back onto his feet. Snow, get behind me, Charming shouted as he leaped to his feet. I'll handle this brute. Billy, the teacher replied, this is the 21st century. Women don't need white knight routine anymore. I can fight my own battles. She planted her feet and raised her hands. When Natalie charged at her, she sent a hard jab and a right hook to the beast's face. The monster screamed angrily and lunged again. This time, Snow White's foot came up and landed a hard blow to the monster's chest. Natalie tumbled to the ground but sprang back to her feet, clawing and scratching at the pretty teacher. Miss White blocked each blow with super fast hands until one of Natalie's punches actually connected and sent her painfully to the ground. Instinctively, Charming and Puck stepped forward, ready to take over the fight. But Snow White flashed them an angry look. They threw their hands up in surrender and moved aside. Snow White sprang to her feet, planted them again, and eyed the monster with a smile. All right, Natalie, she said. School is in session. Natalie roared and leaped at her. Snow White stopped the attack by jumping into the air, spinning around, and roundhouse and kicked the monster in the face. One of Natalie's fangs broke off in the middle, and the monster fell to the ground, groaning in pain. The teacher stood over her with angry eyes and eager fists. If you're smart, you'll stay down, she said. Sabrina and Daphne looked at each other in amazement. Snow, where did you learn to fight? Charming asked, obviously stunned by what he had just seen. I've been studying for years. Now I teach a self-defense class for women and girls at the community center, Snow White replied. We're called Bad Apples. We meet every Saturday at 4 p.m. Sign me up, Daphne said. At that moment, the principal stepped out of the shadows. He was carrying a set of bagpipes and looked a little distraught. Piper, said Charming. You have to stop them, Natalie shouted at Mr. Hamlin. Natalie, this has gone too far, Hamlin cried. I'm going to let them save their grandmother and her friends. Once they're safe, we can finish our plans. No, take care of them now, or I'll tell Daddy, Natalie threatened. He's got your precious Wendell. We can help you get him back, Sabrina promised. No, you can't, Hamlin said, and he raised his bagpipes, blowpipe to his mouth. Rumpelstiltskin's too powerful. You can't beat him. I can't take the risk. You have to understand. I'm sorry. He took a deep breath and blew a long, sorrowful note into the air, and then everything went black. Oh no. He's about to use his powers on the Grimms. We'll see what happens next in our last chapter, chapter 10. See you guys tomorrow.